If you love stories filled with drama, mystery, and real emotions, make sure to subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so you never miss a moment of these incredible tales. The morning sun cast golden rays through the tall windows of Ashford Palace. The kitchen was already alive with activity as chefs prepared breakfast for Queen Eleanor and her family. Steam rose from pots, and the smell of fresh bread filled the air. Head chef Marcus stood at the main counter, his white uniform spotless as always. He had served the royal family for 15 years and took great pride in his work, Sarah. A young royal guard walked past the kitchen entrance on her usual morning patrol. She had only been working at the palace for 6 months, but she was dedicated to her job. Her sharp eyes scanned every corner and every person she passed. The palace was her responsibility now, and she took that seriously. As she walked by the kitchen door, something caught her attention. Through the small window, she saw Chef Marcus standing alone near the Queen's private breakfast tray. His movements seemed nervous and quick. Sarah stopped and watched more carefully. Marcus looked around the kitchen to see if anyone was watching him. Then he pulled a small glass bottle from his jacket pocket. The liquid inside was clear like water. Sarah's heart began to beat faster. She knew the Queen's food was prepared with extreme care, and no one was allowed to add anything without proper approval. Marcus uncapped the bottle and held it over the Queen's teacup. His hand shook slightly as he began to pour. Sarah didn't hesitate. She pushed open the kitchen door with force. The loud bang made Marcus jump, and the bottle slipped from his fingers, crashing onto the marble floor. The clear liquid spread across the tiles, and a strange chemical smell filled the air. Every chef in the kitchen stopped working and turned to look. Marcus stood frozen, his face pale, and his eyes wide with fear. Sarah rushed toward him, her hand moving to the weapon at her side. Marcus raised his hands slowly. He knew there was no escape now. The other kitchen staff backed away, shocked and confused. They had worked with Marcus for years. He was their leader, their teacher. How could he do something like this? Sarah grabbed Marcus by the arm and pulled him away from the food preparation area. Her voice was firm and loud when she spoke. She demanded to know what he was doing. Marcus didn't answer at first. He just stared at the broken bottle on the floor. The head of palace security arrived within minutes, alerted by another guard who had heard the commotion. More guards surrounded the kitchen entrance. The breakfast tray meant for Queen Eleanor sat untouched on the counter. Sarah pointed to the broken bottle and explained exactly what she had. Witness: the security chief ordered an immediate lockdown of the entire kitchen. No one was allowed to leave. The Queen's breakfast tray was taken away for testing. Marcus was handcuffed and led to a secure room for questioning. As he walked through the palace halls between 2 guards, servants and staff members watched in disbelief. Whispers spread quickly through the palace. Someone had tried to poison the Queen. The most trusted chef in the royal household had betrayed them all. In her private chambers, Queen Eleanor was informed of the incident. She sat down slowly, her hands trembling slightly. She had eaten meals prepared by Marcus's countless times. He had cooked for her children, her guests, and her special celebrations. She had trusted him completely. Now that trust was shattered. The Queen's assistant tried to comfort her, but Eleanor's mind was racing with questions. Why would Marcus do this? Who had convinced him? Was her family still in danger? The palace was now in complete chaos. Every meal prepared in the last week was being investigated. Guards questioned every kitchen worker. The royal family's doctor examined everyone who had eaten food from the palace kitchen recently. News of the incident could not be contained for long. By midday, reporters gathered outside the palace gates, desperate for information. The royal family's spokesperson refused to comment, which only made the media more curious. Marcus sat alone in a cold, windowless room deep within the palace security wing. The handcuffs on his wrists felt heavy. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling, casting harsh shadows on the concrete walls. He had been a chef his entire adult life. Cooking was not just his job, but his passion. He had worked his way up from a simple kitchen assistant to the head chef of the royal palace. That position had been his greatest achievement. Now, it was all gone. The door opened, and 2 investigators entered the room. They sat across from Marcus at the metal table. One of them placed a folder on the surface between them. Inside were photographs of the broken bottle and laboratory reports. The liquid Marcus had tried to pour into the Queen's tea was identified as a deadly poison. Just a few drops would have been enough to kill her within hours. The symptoms would have looked like a heart attack. No one would have suspected murder. The lead investigator asked Marcus the most important question. Why did he do it? Marcus closed his eyes and took a deep breath. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, slowly, he began to speak. His voice was quiet and tired. He explained that 3 months ago, men had approached him outside his home late at night. They knew everything about him, including his biggest secret. Years ago, Marcus had made a terrible mistake. He had been involved in a financial crime in another country before coming to work at the palace. He thought that past was buried forever. The men threatened to expose his secret. They had documents and evidence that would destroy his reputation and send him to prison. But they offered him a choice. If he helped them, they would keep his secret safe. They would even pay him a large amount of money. All he had to do was poison the Queen's food. Marcus refused at first. He told them he could never hurt Queen Eleanor. She had been kind to him. She had given him opportunities and treated him with respect, but the threats continued. The men followed him everywhere. They sent him photos of his elderly mother who lived alone in the countryside. They made it clear that if he didn't cooperate, his mother would be harmed. Marcus loved his mother more than anything in the world. She was sick and needed expensive medical treatment. He felt trapped with no way out. Eventually, the pressure became too much. He agreed to their plan. They gave him the poison and specific instructions on how to use it. The investigator listened carefully to Marcus's confession. He asked who these men were. Marcus shook his head sadly. He never learned their real names. They always wore masks when they met him. They contacted him through encrypted messages that disappeared after being read. He had no phone numbers, no addresses, and no way to identify them. The only thing he knew was that they spoke with foreign accents. They seemed to be working for someone powerful who wanted the Queen dead. The second investigator leaned forward. He asked Marcus if he understood the seriousness of what he had almost done. Marcus nodded, tears forming in his eyes. He said he understood completely. He had barely slept in weeks. His conscience had been eating him alive. Every time he looked at the Queen, he felt sick with guilt. On the morning Sarah caught him, his hands were shaking so badly that he almost couldn't go through with it. Part of him was actually relieved when the guard burst through the door. Marcus explained that he had been planning to turn himself in. He couldn't live with the guilt anymore. He would rather face punishment than hurt an innocent person, even if it meant his mother would suffer. The confession lasted for hours. Every detail was recorded and documented. Investigators would now have to verify his story and try to track down the mysterious men who had blackmailed him. But one thing was clear. Marcus was not the mastermind behind this plot. He was a pawn in a much larger and more dangerous game. While Marcus was being questioned, forensic teams swept through his apartment. They searched for any evidence that might lead them to the people behind the assassination attempt. They found the encrypted phone the men had given him, but all the messages had been automatically deleted. Computer experts would try to recover the data, but it would be difficult. The criminals had been very careful to cover their tracks. News of the attempted assassination spread beyond the palace walls like wildfire. Television stations interrupted their regular programming to report the shocking story. Citizens gathered in town squares to discuss what had happened. Queen Eleanor had been loved by her people for decades. She was known for her charity work, her kind heart, and her dedication to improving the lives of ordinary citizens. The thought that someone wanted her dead filled the nation with anger and fear. The Prime Minister held an emergency meeting with his cabinet. National security was now at stake. If foreign agents were operating inside the country and targeting the royal family, it meant the threat was serious. Intelligence agencies were ordered to investigate any connections to hostile foreign governments. The palace security system was being completely reviewed. How had Marcus been able to bring poison into the kitchen without being detected? There were supposed to be multiple layers of security to prevent exactly this type of incident, Sarah. The young guard who had stopped Marcus became an unexpected hero. Her commanding officer praised her sharp observation skills and quick action. If she had been even a few seconds slower, the poison would have been in the Queen's tea. The Queen herself requested to meet with Sarah personally. The meeting took place in the Queen's private sitting room. Eleanor stood when Sarah entered and immediately took both of her hands. The Queen thanked Sarah for saving her life. Her eyes were warm but also sad. Eleanor explained that, in all her years as Queen, she had faced many challenges, but betrayal from within her own household was the most painful. Sarah listened respectfully. She could see that the Queen was not just shaken by the assassination attempt. She was heartbroken by Marcus's betrayal. Eleanor had attended Marcus's wedding years ago. She had sent gifts when his mother fell ill. She had considered him not just an employee, but a trusted member of the palace family. Sarah told the Queen that she was only doing her duty. She had been trained to notice anything unusual, and something about Marcus's behavior that morning had seemed wrong. The Queen smiled and told Sarah that instinct and dedication like hers were rare. She was promoting Sarah to a higher position within the royal guard and giving her a special commendation. Sarah was honored but remained humble. She said she was simply grateful that she had been in the right place at the right time as news of Sarah's heroic actions spread. She received praise from across the country. Letters and messages flooded into the palace, thanking her for protecting the Queen, but Sarah didn't enjoy the attention. She was a private person who preferred to do her job quietly. The other guards respected her even more now. She had proven that even the youngest and newest members of the team could make a crucial difference. Meanwhile, investigators continued their work. They interviewed every person who had contact with Marcus in recent months. They reviewed security camera footage from around the palace and from the streets near Marcus's home. They were looking for any sign of the mysterious men who had blackmailed him. Intelligence analysts studied patterns of communication and travel. They checked for any unusual diplomatic activities or suspicious foreign visitors. A breakthrough came when a street camera near Marcus's apartment captured footage of him meeting with two men in dark clothing 3 weeks earlier. The image quality was not perfect, but facial recognition software began analyzing the footage. Within days, the investigators had a lead. One of the men had been identified. He was a known operative working for a foreign intelligence agency. This confirmed that the assassination plot was not the work of a lone criminal. It was a coordinated operation by a hostile foreign power. The discovery sent shockwaves through the government. This was now an international incident. The foreign ministry summoned the ambassador from the suspected country for an urgent meeting. Diplomatic relations became tense. The accused nation denied any involvement, claiming the evidence was fabricated. But behind closed doors, intelligence agencies from friendly countries shared information that supported the investigation's findings. The plot against Queen Eleanor was part of a larger strategy to destabilize the region. The royal family went into a heightened state of security. Armed guards were posted at every entrance and exit. Food for the royal household was now prepared in a different location with completely new staff, all of whom underwent extensive background checks. Tasters tested every meal before it reached the royal table, an old tradition that had been revived out of necessity. The Queen's daily schedule was changed frequently to make her movements unpredictable. Her public appearances were reduced to only the most essential events. Princess Catherine, the Queen's daughter, took the assassination attempt particularly hard. She was close to her mother and couldn't imagine life without her. Catherine spent hours sitting with Eleanor, talking about their fears and their determination not to let terrorism win. The princess insisted on learning more about security protocols. She wanted to understand how to spot threats and protect herself and her family. The head of security agreed to give her special training, Prince Michael. The Queen's son and heir to the throne became more involved in security matters as well. He met with intelligence chiefs and military commanders. Michael understood that if his mother had been killed, he would have become king under the worst possible circumstances. The nation would have been in mourning and chaos. He realized how fragile stability could be and how important it was to have strong security systems in place. The investigation into Marcus's handlers continued with intensity. International cooperation between intelligence agencies increased. Phone records, financial transactions, and travel patterns were analyzed. Another member of the conspiracy was identified, a woman who worked as a translator at an embassy. She had been the one passing messages between the foreign operatives and Marcus. When agents arrived to arrest her, they found her apartment empty. She had fled the country days earlier. It's clearly warned by someone that the investigation was closing in. This raised a troubling question. Was there a mole inside the investigation itself? How else would the conspirators know to run before being caught? A separate internal investigation was launched to find out if any government officials or palace staff were leaking information. Trust became a rare commodity. Everyone was under suspicion. The atmosphere in the palace became tense and paranoid. Staff members who had worked together for years now viewed each other with doubt. Marcus remained in custody during all of this. His lawyer argued that he should receive a reduced sentence because he had been blackmailed and had ultimately confessed. But prosecutors insisted that he had made a choice to attempt murder. They argued that he could have gone to the police when he was first threatened instead of agreeing to poison the queen. The case became a subject of heated debate across the nation. Some people sympathized with Marcus and believed he was a victim himself. Others felt he deserved the harshest possible punishment for betraying the queen's trust. Marcus's mother was brought to the capital under protective custody. She was elderly and confused about everything that had happened. When she was told what her son had done, she broke down crying. She said she never wanted him to sacrifice his honor for her sake. She would rather have lived her remaining days in pain than see her son become a criminal. Marcus was allowed one brief meeting with his mother. They held each other and wept. It was the last time they would see each other as free people. Public opinion about the incident remained divided. Some blamed the palace security for being too relaxed. They argued that someone like Marcus should never have been able to bring poison into the kitchen. Others defended the security team, pointing out that it was actually a guard who had caught Marcus before any harm was done. Debates raged on television talk shows and in newspaper opinion columns. Everyone had a theory about what should have been done differently. The Queen herself made a televised address to the nation. She appeared calm and composed, though those who knew her well could see the strain in her eyes. Eleanor thanked the people for their concern and support. She assured them that she was safe and that security measures had been strengthened. But she also spoke about forgiveness and understanding. She surprised many by saying that she did not hate Marcus. She understood that he had been manipulated and threatened. While he would face justice for his actions, she hoped that the real criminals, the ones who had orchestrated the plot, would be found and punished. Weeks passed, and the investigation continued to unfold. Intelligence agencies tracked the movements of the identified operative across multiple countries. He had fled shortly after Marcus was arrested, but he made a mistake. He used a credit card at a hotel in a neighboring country. Local police, working with international authorities, raided the hotel and arrested him. The man refused to speak at first, but eventually, faced with overwhelming evidence, he began to cooperate. His confession revealed the full scope of the plot. The assassination of Queen Eleanor was meant to create chaos and political instability. With the Queen dead, there would have been mourning, anger, and possibly riots. The transition of power to Prince Michael would have been rushed and complicated. Alliances between countries would have been tested. The hostile foreign government behind the plot wanted to use this chaos to advance their own political goals in the region. The Queen's death was just one piece of a larger strategic plan. This revelation made the situation even more serious. It meant that the threat was not over just because Marcus had been caught. There could be other plots, other assassins, and other targets. Security for the entire royal family was increased even further. The government began a comprehensive review of all foreign nationals working in sensitive positions. Diplomatic staff from the hostile nation were expelled from the country. Economic sanctions were discussed. The captured operative provided names of other people involved in the conspiracy. Several arrests were made across different countries. An international network of spies and criminals was slowly being dismantled. But the person at the very top, the one who had ordered the assassination, remained out of reach. He was a high-ranking official in the foreign government, protected by diplomatic immunity and the power of his position. Justice for him would be complicated and might never fully come. Back at the palace, life was slowly returning to a new normal. The kitchen had been completely reorganized. New staff members were hired after thorough vetting. Security cameras were installed in every corner. Random inspections became routine. The innocence and trust that had once existed in the palace were gone, replaced by caution and vigilance. Many longtime employees found this new atmosphere sad and oppressive, but they understood why it was necessary. Sarah continued her work as a royal guard, now with additional responsibilities due to her promotion. She led training sessions for other guards, teaching them about the importance of observation and instinct. Her story became part of the training program for new security personnel. She emphasized that threats could come from anywhere, even from people who seemed completely trustworthy. Vigilance had to be constant. Queen Eleanor resumed her public duties gradually. Her first major appearance after the assassination attempt was at a children's hospital, one of her favorite charities. The crowd that gathered to see her was enormous. People wanted to show their support and love for their queen. When Eleanor stepped out of her car, the cheers were deafening. She waved and smiled, though her security detail remained tense and alert throughout the visit. The queen spent hours talking with sick children, reading them stories, and bringing joy to their difficult lives. It was vintage Eleanor, showing that she would not be intimidated or changed by those who wished her harm. The media coverage of her return to public life was overwhelmingly positive. Commentators praised her courage and her commitment to her people. Some called her the strongest queen in the nation's history. Eleanor dismissed such grand statements in a later interview. She said she was simply doing what she had always done, serving her people to the best of her ability. She refused to live in fear or to let the assassination attempt define her reign. Marcus's trial began 6 months after his arrest. The courtroom was packed with journalists, curious citizens, and security personnel. Marcus entered wearing a simple gray suit, looking much older than he had on the morning of his arrest. His lawyer presented evidence of the blackmail and threats he had faced. Character witnesses spoke about his years of dedicated service and his love for his mother. The prosecution, however, presented the undeniable fact that Marcus had attempted to murder the queen. His motives might be understandable, but his actions were inexcusable. The trial lasted for 3 weeks. Every detail of the conspiracy was presented to the jury. Experts testified about the poison Marcus had tried to use. Security footage showed him receiving the poison from the conspirators. His own confession was played in court. The jury listened carefully to all the evidence, knowing that their decision would be scrutinized by the entire nation. The question was not whether Marcus was guilty. He had already admitted his crime. The question was how much mercy he deserved given the circumstances. After 2 days of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict. Marcus was found guilty of attempted murder and conspiracy. However, they recommended a reduced sentence due to the extreme duress he had been under. The judge agreed with this recommendation. Marcus was sentenced to 15 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 10 years. It was a significant punishment, but less severe than the life sentence some had expected. When the sentence was announced, Marcus showed no emotion. He simply nodded and thanked his lawyer. In a surprising move, Queen Eleanor sent a letter to the court to be read after the sentencing. In it, she expressed her disappointment and hurt over Marcus's betrayal. But she also acknowledged the impossible situation he had been placed in by the true criminals. She stated that while justice required punishment, compassion required understanding. She hoped that Marcus would use his time in prison to find peace and redemption. The letter moved many people in the courtroom to tears. It demonstrated the Queen's remarkable capacity for forgiveness, even in the face of a threat to her life. Marcus was transferred to a maximum security prison in the countryside. His mother passed away 6 months into his sentence, never recovering from the shock and heartbreak of what had happened. Marcus was allowed to attend her funeral under heavy guard. It was a small, private ceremony. As he stood by her grave, Marcus finally allowed himself to fully break down. He had tried to save her, but in the end, he had only caused her pain. That guilt would stay with him for the rest of his life. The broader conspiracy continued to have consequences for years. Relations between the affected countries remained strained. New security protocols were implemented not just at the palace but at government buildings across the nation. The incident became a case study in security training programs around the world. It demonstrated how trusted insiders could be turned into threats through blackmail and manipulation. Security experts wrote papers and gave lectures about the lessons learned from the attempt on Queen Eleanor's life. Sarah remained in the royal guard for many years, eventually becoming head of security herself. She never forgot the morning she stopped Marcus in the kitchen. It had been a defining moment in her life and career. She often thought about how different things would have been if she had walked by the kitchen just 30 seconds later. The Queen's life had been saved by a combination of Sarah's vigilance, her training, and perhaps a bit of good fortune. It reminded everyone that security was not just about technology and procedures, but about dedicated people who took their responsibilities seriously. Queen Eleanor continued her reign with grace and strength. The assassination attempt became a footnote in her long and distinguished time as queen, not the defining moment. She refused to let fear control her life or her decisions. She continued to meet with her people, support charitable causes, and represent her nation on the world stage. When historians later wrote about her reign, they mentioned the assassination attempt but focused more on her decades of service. Her modernization of the monarchy and her deep connection with ordinary citizens. The incident also brought about positive changes. Security throughout the nation improved. Intelligence sharing between friendly countries became more efficient. New technologies were developed to detect poisons and other threats. The palace implemented a program to better support staff members who might be vulnerable to blackmail or coercion. Confidential counseling services were made available. The goal was to create an environment where someone like Marcus could ask for help before being forced into a terrible choice. Years later, a journalist who had followed the case closely wrote a book about the incident. It became a bestseller, fascinating readers with the detailed account of how close the Queen had come to death, and how a young guard's instinct had saved her. The book interviewed many of the key people involved, including Sarah, investigators, and even Marcus from his prison cell. Marcus expressed deep remorse for his actions and gratitude that the Queen had survived. He said he spent every day trying to become a better person and to find a way to atone for his betrayal. The story of the assassination attempt became a reminder of several important truths. It showed that evil could work through manipulation and fear, turning good people into instruments of harm. It demonstrated that vigilance and dedication could prevent tragedies even when systems failed. It revealed that leadership in times of crisis required both strength and compassion, and it proved that trust, once broken, could be incredibly difficult to rebuild. But that forgiveness was still possible, even in the darkest circumstances. The palace eventually returned to something resembling normal operations, though the scars of that day remained. Staff members were more cautious, security was more visible, and the innocence of earlier times was gone forever. But life continued. Meals were prepared, ceremonies were held, and the royal family carried out their duties. The palace, like the nation itself, had faced a serious threat and had survived. The incident had tested everyone involved, and while some had failed that test, others had risen to meet it with courage and honor. Queen Eleanor lived for many more years after the assassination attempt, eventually passing the crown to her son in a peaceful transition. When she died of natural causes at an advanced age, the entire nation mourned. Millions of people lined the streets for her funeral procession. Among the mourners was Sarah, now retired, who remembered the day she had saved the Queen's life. She thought about how history might have been different. How many moments and decisions had led to this peaceful ending, rather than a tragedy decades earlier? As she watched the Queen's coffin pass by, Sarah felt grateful that she had been given the chance to make a difference when it mattered most.